welcome Mr. Nate Warfield from Microsoft.
Thank you very much. Thanks everybody for tuning in. I am Nate Warfield. I work for Microsoft. And what I'm going to be talking about today is why you need to wash your hands, because this is bot country. I like to start with a little bit on sort of why is this interesting, right? I'm really interested in network security. It's what I'm passionate about. And today, as we're all, attending SaaS from home and working our remote workforce, our workforces have turned into remote workforces. It's more important than ever. We're seeing vulnerabilities against network equipment. They're getting used within hours, days, sometimes, and if hackers have moved away from, if people remember the 2017 WannaCry and the NotPetya cyber attacks, they were sort of just carpet bomb, very non-precise for the most part. Now what they're doing is they're using these types of vulnerabilities to get into your network and deploy targeted ransomware. We saw this happen with TravelX at the end of December, and we've started seeing this being deployed against hospitals and healthcare networks now that are fighting, the pandemic. So in this type of a situation, lives are actually at stake, right? I think we narrowly avoided anyone passing away in 2017 when the National Health Services in the UK were shut down. If that happens again today, I'm afraid that actually may not be the case, right? Somebody could actually perish due to this type of an attack. And also, your network perimeter got real big. If you're running an enterprise network, if your job is to take care of the security of your network, it is now expanded to all of your home users' house networks, as well as what you've already known to take care of. So this is the new normal. All of these things are now on your corporate network, right? These are old routers, unpatched routers, possibly hacked routers. That IoT refrigerator that everybody thought was so cool, yeah, that's also on your corporate network now. It's connected to your home users' network. It's therefore very close to your network. All of the IoT home media devices, right? The Samsung smart TVs. These are all things you can find on Shodan, right? With just a quick search. These are things that are pointing out to the internet, and these are now possible proxies back into your corporate network. And a lot of these people, a lot of your users are using commodity hardware, right? They're using routers, come from their ISPs. They're not using, the stuff that you deploy in your enterprise that's been tested and patched and kept up to date. You can see, another Shodan screenshot of just basic HTTP authentication to get into these broadband routers, right? There's no 2FA. It may not even be using SSL for the admin panels. But I'm sure all of your users remember to change the refrigerator passwords because, the FBI was nice enough to warn all of us to do this, right? So the enterprise risk, this is a lot of the stuff that we've seen for years, right? And even some of the stuff I talked about a couple of years ago, these are systems that are not being patched, right? There's 126,000 machines today that haven't had the SMB Ghost vulnerability that Microsoft fixed back in March. They still haven't been patched for that, right? These are all out there just waiting to get hit. PII exposure or personally identifiable information exposure can happen to anyone. Obviously, even a company as big as Microsoft, we had a little issue a couple months ago. But today, this type of data could be, medical records. It could be medical imaging data. It could be stuff for hospitals that would be either valuable for attackers or very, very terrible if it was lost or ransomware or locked up. And then the network security hygiene thing, even enterprises do stuff like leave routers with telnet open to the internet. And it even has a thing saying it has the default password. I'm kind of clipping the password out so that it's not giving people a tip. But this is just how easy it is for bad guys to find stuff on your network. And it's important that you do this first, right? And then with your network folks and your staff that are all working remote, stuff like your always on, your lights out management for your servers, this stuff can get exposed because, if they can't walk into your data center to reset a server, they need to be able to connect to it. Well, you can find those things on Shodan as well, right? And if you're, hopefully everybody's using a strong password, but these are all entry points into your network that are more valuable now because nobody's in the office. So I use a few tools to find this stuff, and most of these things are I call them open source intelligence. A lot of them you can use for free or pay for better access. Census is a really good one. As is Binary Edge. I don't use these ones as heavily as a couple other tools, mostly because my job is nice enough to buy me access to a couple of the other tools. BGPview, I always like to say this is one of my favorite sites for doing attribution of IPs to figure out what networks they're on. This is something you may have to do as you're trying to figure out, looking at your VPN logs, where is these IPs coming from? What networks are these people coming from? You kind of have to remap the perimeter based on where your remote users are coming from. So It's just more network intelligence you need to have than the things that you've always done of where all your IPs are. So the two tools I'm really going to get into are Shodan and Gray Noise. So Gray Noise, I'll start with Gray Noise, and it's basically a sensor network. And what it does is it has a bunch of machines that are out on the internet that pick up indiscriminate scanning, mostly botnets, brute forcing attempts, things that are sort of just spraying the internet with traffic, either port scans or throwing payloads. It's not going to pick up targeted attacks because usually attackers are smarter than to spray them at hundreds of thousands or millions of IPs. But what's interesting is you can start pulling sort of metrics data. And I'm using big things like countries here, but this is stuff that you could also refine down to either a network range, autonomous system numbers, things that are more relevant to your specific business. But for ease of demonstration, we're going to go with the world here. So every single country on Earth has been picked up sending malicious traffic across the internet, spraying payloads and bots. Even down all the way down in Antarctica, there's one machine that's out there spraying malicious payloads around, which is kind of interesting. There's another 9 million machines that are doing unknown activities. Now, some of these are benign, and a lot of these are just traffic that Gray Noise hasn't yet developed a signature for and hasn't figured out what they're doing. So at any given time, you've got 15 million and change machines that are out there just spraying the internet with either garbage traffic or weird traffic or port scan traffic. So there's a lot of stuff going on that you can see, and it gets exposed by using Gray Noise. So kind of an example, if we're looking at Greenland, right? So I was like, oh, let's see who's in Greenland. You can quickly say, this is a Gray Noise screenshot. You can say, all right, show me the malicious traffic coming from Greenland. It'll give you this IP address. You're like, okay, well, that's all well and good. What do I do with it now? Well, you can go plug that into Shodan, and you can do this with just a free account. You can put it in there and say, well, what does this system look like? And what it'll tell you is, okay, well, you can see the little icon that it's been picked up scanning the internet. And then at the bottom, you can see, okay, this thing has a confirmed vulnerability on it that Shodan has detected. So it's a pretty high probability that this machine was hacked into via this IIS vulnerability, and then it was repurposed into an MS SQL brute forcer scanning machine, right? So with two free tools, or essentially free tools, you can figure out, were this something from your users' networks, you could maybe quickly figure out, okay, there's something going on and going sideways. To jump a little deeper, if you get Gray Noise and you set up the command line version of it, this is one of the coolest things that as I was playing around getting ready to do this talk, I figured out. There's a feature called Analyze from their command line, and you can take a log file, any sort of log file, and just feed it through the Analyze tool. And what it'll do is it'll pull all the IP addresses out, and it'll go look them up in Gray Noise and say, hey, have you ever seen this IP address doing something? So the first use case here is pull your VPN logs out, run them through Gray Noise. If you see that all of a sudden a few of your users have been picked up from their home networks, part of Mirai, or doing, throwing payloads or doing just anything bad, you're going to want to narrow in on those and say, hey, maybe you send them an email, or you turn off their VPN account and say, hey, we need to check into your router because you've been picked up doing something odd. They may not even know, right? But it'll give you at least some level of fidelity of like, what is your remote workforce doing that they may not know about. There's another really cool feature. I believe this one is still in beta, but what it allows you to do is extract a packet capture of network traffic going back in time from everything that Gray Noise has seen. So I used the same Greenland machine and said, okay, I looked at the date time that it had been picked up, asked Gray Noise to send me a sliced packet capture. I had to obfuscate some chunks because one of the features they're working on is not exposing their sensor IP addresses. But you can see towards the bottom that the username SA and password SA, that's your standard Microsoft SQL default creds. And so, right now I have a packet capture in time going back 3 or 4 months showing me that machine in Greenland, what exactly it tried to do, which I don't know. I think this is pretty cool. And then you can also use Gray Noise to augment some of your other threat feeds or threat intelligence information. I found this FireEye blog post, a couple months ago, and was kind of digging through, and I noticed that they had an HTTP log entry. So I thought, I wonder if Gray Noise has seen this. And it's important to note that Gray Noise just keeps a log of everything it sees. So, today it may not know what this strange web path is. 6 months down the road, when somebody figures out what it is, we can then look historically back through all of the time that Gray Noise has seen it and figure out, okay, when roughly is the first time that we saw somebody try to do this stuff. So right here, I said, okay, let me take this funky path, put it into gray noise, and then boom, I have 200 IP addresses, most of them in China, that are trying to throw this specific exploit payload, right? And if I wanted, I could then firewall these off or block them at my border routers, or just have it as information, right? It's a really good way. It's a really powerful tool that's fairly new to the market. So one of the fun things I used it to do is map out a timeline, an attack timeline for the Citrix NetScaler. They called it the local file inclusion attack. Basically, this allowed people to hack into a VPN device, a very expensive VPN device, and you know what happens. If you hack a VPN device, it's got connectivity to your entire corporate network, right? These are the keys to the kingdom. So back in December, Citrix had disclosed that there was a vulnerability that they knew about. It didn't get a lot of attention until January when this Tripwire article came out. With a very detailed blog post talking about what it was, how to test for it. It basically had proof of concept exploit code because this vulnerability didn't require any special coding. There was no ASLR or anything to bypass. It was just a curl command sent to a specific path on the NetScaler. Greynoise added a signature the next day. And then the day after they added a signature, they picked up people trying to exploit this thing. So 2 days after they'd been hit the internet, people were already throwing automated payloads trying to exploit this thing, right? We're not even talking advanced attackers. We're talking script kiddies had put this into automated systems in 2 days. You can see that Trusted Sec picked it up around the same time. Greynoise flagged this IP as malicious. The thing that's interesting is then a week later, what had happened is initially there was no real patch for this. So what admins were doing was they were saying, hey, if you see a request come in for this path, block the path, and then just don't let that IP address hit this path. So what people started doing was URL encoding the path to try to bypass the filters and sort of get around and still get in. It took them about a week before they started picking up these evasion attempts. Chronologically, the 8th of January was Wednesday. Friday was the 10th. So if you were running a network and very busy or had just come back from the holidays, you quite literally could have gone home on a Friday, come back on a Monday, and found your VPN device had been hacked into and your network was basically owned. Like, that's how fast this stuff is advancing. So if you don't want to have this happen to you, how do you do it, right? So this is a lot of the stuff that I'd like to do. I'm not going to get super deep into the low-hanging or the simple features of Shodan because I figure a lot of people have seen this. Anybody can go play with this stuff for free. But port and product, kind of two of the bread and butters of Shodan. The really powerful stuff comes from the tags and some of the enterprise features. So the tagging I don't really know all of the details of how it works, but you can pick up a lot of stuff that's specific categories of things, right? The compromised feature, actually that compromised feature was what I spoke about at SAS a couple of years ago. I helped to write. You can see different medical device imaging things, infected machines with malware. The other really powerful feature is the vulnerability search. You can see that Shodan screenshot. That is machines that are not patched for Bluekeep. So there's 470,000 of those. Now, with great power comes great responsibility. So Shodan chooses to keep the ability to search for tags or for vulnerabilities. They're locked behind either the corporate or the enterprise licenses, which are very expensive, out of the range of your average script kiddie, very affordable for the corporate environment. So going down the Shodan rabbit hole, right? So the idea we're going here is we want to figure out, what does a specific device look like, and then narrow down the search to see if there's any of them on either our home user networks, or we build lists of IP once you figure out where your users are coming from. You can start looking and say, hey, are they using any of these different types of devices, either things that have been reported to be vulnerable or just, unsupported old routers, things like that. So Shodan uses these metadata that they call facets. And this is a command line snippet that I'm showing you here. Anybody can use this functionality. This doesn't require an expensive license. So you can kind of say, hey, give me the stats for the specific facet of the metadata that I want. And then the net:0/0 is shorthand for the entire internet. So right here, if I want to look for the HTTP WAF, the web application firewall, I can see, all right, here's what Shodan knows, right? And you can see right in there's the NetScalers. You've got Cloudflare and a whole bunch of other ones. One of the other the ones that I like to use is looking at SSL certificate data. So a lot of your out-of-the-box solutions like Kubernetes, a lot of your Soho routers, a lot of your IoT stuff, they will generate a new SSL certificate, but all of the issuer information is going to be the same. And once you figure out what that is, you can then go and profile, like this one here. I say, okay, look for the issuer common name containing Kubernetes. And now I've got 250,000 Kubernetes machines that are out there. Obviously, 250,000 is not going to be your network, but you would say, okay, well, now I'm going to restrict it down by my autonomous system or my IP networks and say, all right, cool. I found some Kubernetes boxes or whatever you're looking for. One of the other cool features is it looks inside the HTML of web pages. So you can find things that you wouldn't think you should be able to find. Like all of these logout pages is actually, it's a redirect that gets sent, but Shodan picks it up. So these are all endpoints for F5 SSL VPN devices, right? So you wouldn't think those are easy to find. It turns out it picks them up pretty easily. The HTTP title field, another one, right? GPON home routers, very common. Like most of your Soho off-the-shelf consumer grade routers, if the web admin interface is turned on for the internet side, it's all going to be the same. All of the details, the title, the login page are going to be identical. Even when they change software versions, it'll be the same stuff. So it's very easy to quickly profile these and figure out, how many of your users are running them. And then once again, SSL cert subject CN. This is very similar to the cert issuer CN. You notice I kind of am harping on the VPN thing because we're all working on VPNs. But here's a quick trick. Shows you everything that reports to be a VPN endpoint. So some of the ways that I do this, right? One of the caveats of the vulnerability search of Shodan is it takes a while before it works. They don't initially have a test, and they won't do any sort of a test that's in any way invasive. So there are some gotchas. If there's no way to test without hacking the system, Shodan's not going to run it. So what you may end up is, plus the day of disclosure, you're like, all right, and people are looking for it. How do you find it while you wait for Shodan to put a test in place? And then it does take a little bit of time for them to scan 4 billion IP addresses. So you may be waiting a week or two. So you find yourself a sample system, right? And I think I found this one in Thailand just by looking for self-signed certificates. You can go into the details of it, and you can start looking at all the metadata. And you can see down here, okay, the title says Pulse Connect Secure. So that's a giveaway. And then towards the bottom, the product is also Pulse Secure. So now, even though Shodan, it's a little misleading, I took this screenshot after the fact, so it has the vulnerability information there. But if we pretend that hadn't happened, you wouldn't see that. So I do still have information I can use to go and search for it and say, okay, product, Pulse Secure, cool. Now I know where all of them are. And now I know how to go and look for them on either my networks or my partner networks or any of my connected networks. And you can do this minutes after you find out what you're looking for. And then if you need to download data, so I usually I'm a command line guy, even though I work for Microsoft, I still live in the command line. But downloading a JSON file, running it through Python or JQ, you can start doing other correlation, looking for specific patterns of whatever it is you need. So some of the fingerprinting case studies, right? Pulse VPN. We can use HTTP HTML as well, right? We don't have to just go by product because not all of them were necessarily vulnerable. The ones that were contained this /DANA-NA string. So right away, I can go and search for them, find them, and then, a few weeks later, the vuln search for that specific vulnerability was going to be available. Same thing with NetScalers, right? The Citrix one, HTTP WAF for NetScaler. In this instance, I think pretty much every single one that they made, every version of software that was out had the vulnerability. And then, same thing, search by the vuln number. One of the more interesting ones is an RD gateway patch. This is actually a patch that Microsoft released a month or two ago. And we were trying to figure out how can I find these things online? Initially, because the vulnerability was on the UDP service, which is a connectionless protocol, you're not going to be able to get stuff like HTTP data from that IP or that port. But what you can do is do some sort of mental little bit of detective work and think, okay, RD Gateway runs on RD web servers. Find myself an RD web server, and you can see this HTTP HTML is looking for a specific table field inside the logon page of the remote desktop web server. And that's a pretty, that data isn't going to exist on any other system except, or that field won't be on any other system. At that point, what you can do is download it, and then you'd have to do the sort of manual correlation with Python or what have you to say, okay, show me remote desktop web servers that also have port 3391 open to the internet. And now you know these are RD gateway servers that you may need to go and prioritize, making sure that they're all up to date on their patches. So, and some closing thoughts here. Right, attackers thrive on chaos, and there's no more chaotic time in the internet in our lives than right now. Right, we're all here in our houses having a Kaspersky conference. You know, some of us. I live in the Pacific Northwest. I haven't been able to really do anything for the last 6 weeks, and I know folks in other parts of the world have been in lockdown even longer than us. Your network perimeter is changed, and it's likely that your perimeter is going to be changed for the foreseeable future, possibly forever. The new normal may be that a majority of our workforce is working remote, and attackers know this, right? They are very, very smart and very, very crafty. They're going to go after your home users to try to back channel into your corporate network, right? They find the low-hanging fruit. And a lot of this stuff isn't just low-hanging. This is like rotting on the ground fruit, like it's compost. We need to get rid of it. So it's important that you assess your network regularly, right? Attackers are doing this already. You don't need to port scan your whole network. Shodan's already doing it for you. Binary Edge is doing it for you. All you need to know is learn how to search and do the right searches, ask the right questions to get the right information back from these services that are out there. You can also get some alerting. Greynoise and Shodan both have ways where, with Greynoise, they just added this, I think, last week. If you tell it, here's my IP network, if Greynoise ever picks up weird or malicious traffic coming out of your network, it can send you an email and say, hey, did you know that this IP address in your corporate network just started doing something bizarre? This similar thing with Shodan, you can tell it the same information, and if an IP address or a port suddenly comes online and Shodan picks it up and it hasn't seen it before, it'll send you an email and say, hey, just so you know, somebody turned on a service or a system, and this is just getting some more fidelity, keeping an eye on things that you need to know about, right? I've shown a bunch of Shodan queries, so I have a couple of GitHub links here. The first one is from one of my GitHubs. I confess it is woefully undocumented. It's just a list of queries, but it's a whole bunch of queries. The much better documented one, and one of my favorites, is this Jake Jarvis gentleman. He has a ton of really good stuff. All sorts of interesting devices and strange things that, depending on what your industry is, you may or may not have these on your network. More importantly, did you know you had them on your network? Like, that's the thing. You don't know what you don't know. And this is the idea here, is to help you get some fidelity around knowing more. 0 days are expensive, right? I work for the Patch Tuesday team in Microsoft. We fix them all the time. They are very complex to build these days. But what's not expensive are mistakes. And that's what attackers are going to focus on. They're going to focus on your mistakes. They're going to focus on your oversight. And that's how they're going to get in. So with that, thank you, SAS. Thank you, all of you online, for having me. I'm just going to take a couple minutes and just share the sort of what I've been doing. So I wanted to share, so there's a couple things. So my quarantunities that I've been taking advantage of, cooking dinner every night. Like, I love to cook. I've been able to do it every single night for the last month. And my little boy, he likes to sit in his high chair and watch me cook. I found out last night he actually likes raw onions, which is very strange. But he likes to taste everything, and apparently raw onions are his thing now. One of the other things I did that I'm really proud of and really excited about, I co-founded this thing we call CTI League. And the goal that we've had, myself and 3 other gentlemen started this about 6 weeks ago. We are providing free threat intelligence and networks data, network security information to hospitals, healthcare networks, medical industry folks. We've been collaborating with CERTs, with ISACs. I think we have Interpol and Europol and a bunch of other law enforcement agencies, government agencies. And the idea is, we're all stuck at home. We see our first responders putting their lives on the line every day. And this is what little thing we can do to get back to them and try to say, hey, you know what? I can't necessarily go in and help, take care of somebody who's sick. But what I can try to do is at least if I can stop one attack against a hospital, if I can stop one network from getting ransomware, maybe in some way, we can actually contribute to fighting this pandemic. If you want more information, the website's there. The Twitter handle is there as well. We just put out a report a couple weeks ago. You're welcome to check it out. And with that, I will pause for any questions.
How does gray noise pick the traffic?
So it doesn't pick traffic. It's if the way to think about it is it has a wide open packet capture on every single port, pointing at the internet, listening to all of the garbage that's getting sprayed, and it's dumping it into a database and making it searchable.
There are communities that you can recommend, some crowdsourced communities that I can go learn and follow and figure out my own searches. Like, is there like one, two that you recommend for folks to go dig in?
Well, I don't have any off the top of my head. The two links that I posted are a couple GitHub things. Please feel free to reach out on Twitter. I'm mostly responsive in DM, but yeah, I'd love to talk more with anybody who's interested about it.
You were mentioning to scan VPN logs for IP addresses that are flagged by gray noise. Someone is asking, it'd be interesting if you could also take automatic actions in case a match is detected, for instance, blocking access to the VPN. Is that something?
Well, I mean, so Gray Noise is a service, and it has a Python or a JSON a REST API. So you could, in theory, you could write your own code to do this. There very well may be third-party integrations that already work with it, but it's not hard to do it yourself, right? Thank you for having me. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Be safe out there.